positive interaction first before anything negative happens as they get older. That's something we really cherish. Take this time to answer questions. As it was mentioned, we'll address everything we can. If something's personal or confidential, obviously we won't be able to do that in this public forum, but we will definitely all be here afterwards.
I think with the first one here, I think Officer Powers just really answered it. You know, when we mentioned there's a police officer in the building, you know, with the number of cases that we have, you know, why do we need a police? When somebody said they talked to a friend, you can't believe we have an officer in the building. As you look at schools throughout the state, that's really become a trend of having an SRO in the building, a student resource officer. And so as we do that, every school uses the officers different. And so like he just said, typically it was a learning process to start off and say, how are we going to use Dave in the classroom? And like he said, everything goes through administration first. We don't have teachers calling the police officer and saying, hey, come down here, I need you to do this. And so typically that comes to us first, and then if we feel we need him involved in the situation, sometimes he's not necessarily doing anything with the situation. Sometimes I'd like to come in and just have him sit and look at him while I'm talking to him. And so as they're sitting there, just the presence of that police officer is, wow, I'm in trouble. There's a police officer sitting in the room with me, with the principal, with the counselors, and sometimes that's a little bit more than just talking to them about those things. And kind of the nice thing about expediting the process of what's going on in given situations where we don't have too many where maybe Dave gets a call, a parent calls and says, hey, I'm really concerned, you know, my son might have brought a knife to school or something to school. I didn't really know. He was upset this morning. And as a police officer, he just can't come in and search. He just can't go through lockers and do that. We're kind of governed by different rules. And the nice thing about that is he can take that and come to me and explain the situation to administration. We can say, yep, that deems something that we can go and look that locker for, and then we can go address it right then. So just that release of information back and forth to each other, I can pass stuff off to them, they pass stuff off to us, and we can take care of things immediately and address those issues right away, where sometimes it might have taken a longer process to get through there. So is there anything else with that you'd like to answer?
I can't get your names right, so I probably shouldn't answer questions.
And kind of along that one, as he talked about, sometimes it's like a Christmas tree in the building too. People come in and, oh, the police officer, he's like a new puppy dog. And the kids come up to him and they want to pet him. And, you know, it's unique, and some of the kids are drawn to that. And, you know, somebody said, if a child feels they can't go to the police officer, it says, you know, sometimes they feel like he was friends with the mean kids. And so I think as we look at really defining who the mean kids are, you know, sometimes different kids are just more apt to walk up and talk things, and sometimes it's a situation where he talked about within the lifestyle of what they are, that's just something maybe they're used to in their life. They've seen a police officer a lot. They've dealt with certain things. Sometimes students like that, they come up and have that relationship, and other kids see them talking, and so I can, you know, guarantee that, you know, he's not here to be friends with the students. He's not here as a friend. He's here as a resource officer. You know, we've even had situations where we've had to limit the access of kids wanting to come in and write hello, good morning on his bulletin board, or what's he doing in the middle of working on something, because, you know, the kids are drawn to him. And like you said, you know, if we were to rotate that out, it's really a partnership of how can we use him, what can we do, and if it was like a continual process, he's gone through training, he's gone through tons of seminars, he works with the students, he gets to know the faculty, and so if that was to be a working rotation, you know, it would never be it'd be like your student having you know, every quarter we're going to have a different teacher, you know, in the building, and they're going to have a different person for that. So it's kind of building that relationship, getting to know the administration, getting to know everybody else, and being able to use that resource as best we can. So I'll let somebody, how do we ensure that students are getting addressed regardless of what their parents do? So I guess I could take that as my son's going to be in 5th grade next year. I have my son's a student in the building and is causing problems with somebody, and I'm here as I don't know how many teachers. We have a large number of teachers right now that have kids in the middle school. And so how do we ensure that those kids are getting to dress regardless of what their parents do? Is there bipartisanship? This student's able to do this because his mom works here or his dad works there. Anybody?
Let's say that's a similar question. What happens if I pull over the mayor or the mayor's daughter or the local barfly or his kid? It makes no difference. And we really strive to being professional and being impartial. And we just look at the situation and investigate, like he talks about, investigate every situation, talk to people, and take actions based on what happened, not who the child is or who their parents are.
And I think we as administrators, teachers, really hold our kids to a high standard as well. And so as we have those expectations, fair or not, I want to know if my son or daughter's doing something so I can address it. It's an embarrassment to me as a teacher, as a parent, if somebody's coming in with complaints and saying these things are happening or what's that going on. And so I don't think it's ever an issue that as we would skirt the issue, or as kids may come off and feel that. Sometimes that's kind of a nervous conversation, I would say, more than what the expectation would be is, I don't know if I should say anything, he's the principal, or she's the PE teacher, I don't know if I can say anything or if they're going to do anything.
I guess I read that, when you said that question, I guess I interpreted it a different way. I would take that to mean, what do you do in situations where the parents of the offender don't back you, or in cases may even threaten the school? I'm going to sue the school if you suspend my child. My child didn't do this, could not have done this, and how dare you take actions against my kid? And then they threaten to do something to the school, to the teachers, badmouth them, put the information out on Facebook. How do you handle situations like that where you're not getting cooperation from the parents?
Direct.
Do you want to pass that?
He's like,
I didn't quite understand.
I think I know where you're coming from, and it is a very difficult situation, and I think it goes back to the documentation. Document, document, document. We try to keep the records that we can. We try to have everything in order. It is very difficult. I will say I have a tendency to question a little bit. I'm a little nervous sometimes calling parents because it's hard to know what they're going to say. I remember the first time a young man was in the office and the principal was gone, and I was just going to visit with him because I don't hand out punishment or anything, and he said, I want to call my dad. And I thought, I would never have wanted to call my dad from school. And that to me was kind of the turning point in the power and authority being taken away from the school. And I was really uncomfortable with that because I saw some of you nodding as well that Dad, Mom, Grandma didn't want to call him unless I was sick. And this young man wanted to call Dad. And so we have to just document as much as we can and say, I'm sorry you feel that way. These are the facts, kind of like with the legal system, and we just have to go from there and believe in what we're doing. And the important thing is to be forthright like we are now and to have our policies in place.
If there's repeat offenders, why are they not being suspended? How many times do they have to repeat before there is a punishment? And that kind of just goes within, like we talked about, every situation is going to be a little bit different. We're never going to have 20 sets of consequences before we get to that point. Again, it depends on the situation, what the severity is, what was it that happened. Many times, it's not that they want a consequence, they just want retaliation against that. This was done to my son or my daughter, I want something to happen to them. And so sometimes it's a situation of deciding, is it going to be in-school suspension, is it going to be out-of-school suspension? And sometimes we look at that and say, if a student goes home and we kick them out, what are they going to be doing out of school when they're out home by themselves? Because is that parent going to stay home and take care of them that day and not go to work while their son or daughter's at home? In most cases, probably not. They're going to be home on their own. So lots of times within an in-school suspension, that's kind of some of the things that we weigh to see whether we're going to deal that way or not. So as we do those things, it's just as we look at that documentation, what does that justify? If there's been a series of events, we've had a conversation. We've had somebody sit on something. We've had consequences, detentions, whatever it might be. It started out there, went a little bit higher, and they've had. And that kind of goes back to, I think sometimes people just don't know how many people are being in school suspension, because that's not something, when we deal with the situation, I don't say, okay, this is what happened, I suspended the other student. So I think sometimes there's that feeling of, I don't know, or we want to know, and kind of that's that frustration, even within us as well as, you know, we can't tell you, but there are those things going on, and so those things are happening with students, and we do get to those levels of consequences.
And I think what we need to remember when we go back to what you learned today with the PowerPoint is we are here about education. And it is very, very important that we are educating students when they do things that are incorrect. They're not bad kids. They're making bad choices. And so we constantly talk about making good choices, making bad choices, and we don't use the word punishment. We use the word consequences. In life, we have consequences. If we fall in love, we get married, we have a family, those are good consequences. If we do something wrong and hurtful, we have consequences that aren't necessarily going to be fun, because we want the students to learn from those mistakes. But we are here to educate those students, because in middle school, that's their job as middle school students, to push the envelope and to learn the parameters and test all the things that you have done as parents to help rear your children and teach them respect and teach them the values and the beliefs. They're here to push those beliefs and see if it really works in real life. So we're constantly remembering that when we do discipline, we are constantly educating the student and what we can do differently next time. And that's part of the reteaching, and that's why what Scott said is when we have our discussions, we involve the counselors, we involve Officer Powers. Maybe it's to the level where we are doing an in-school suspension and we involve Officer Powers to say, okay, this is real life. We're not here to threaten, but we're telling you if this continues, the next step will be. That is education. So we want to make sure that we address that, yes. Okay, what's involved in in-school suspension? We actually have a room that's attached to our TLC room, and it's our in-school suspension room. And students, when they are assigned to that room, they're there all day. Lunch is provided to them. They get the basic lunch. They don't go and get extras. We get lunch to them. And they are given all the work that they would have as if they were in class. We have we have an email system that we send out to all the teachers. Teachers respond back really quick and provide that in-school suspension associate the information so the student can have the materials they need to be able to get the work accomplished. And unless that student refuses to do the work in in-school suspension, the student will bring everything due the next day in class as if they were, not there the day before, or as if they were there the day before.
And the exclusion, I agree with setting them apart, but it's also, it seems to me, in some form a study hall where they can get all their work done. You keep talking about educating them. What would be wrong with part of that suspension? They watch a bullying video. They do a report on bullying video or something.
And we do. We don't have videos necessarily. That's a great idea, though. But what we do is we have a series of documents that I have printed off for every student that is in school suspension, regardless of the behavior, whether it's hitting a student or refusing to comply with the rules. We have different they're handouts, but they're mini stories, and then they have to reflect on those stories. That's based on the behavior as to why they're in that room, and that is completed by every student. And we could have 3 students in there, and maybe they're there for 3 different reasons. Each student has their own reason. They have to complete that packet information. And then they also have another sheet that they have to reflect after we've already dealt with them. They have to reflect on what behavior did I do, why did I do it, what can I do next time. So it's kind of a double or triple check after we've already dealt with them, and they fill that out. That is an addition too. So I'm glad you brought that up, because being in education, we have it set up. I assume that everyone knows that, but they don't. But we do have that system. Now, a video, and we can easily have that because our associate has a computer. That's a great idea. We have plenty of wonderful anti-bullying videos we can have students watch and make an observation and document that way as well. Next question.
This one isn't necessarily a question. This is a statement. One of our children was caught being the bully. We were contacted that day, and action was taken immediately. We appreciated the speed in which it was handled. This process helped us deal with it better at home. Thank you. And thank you for writing that. As we do those things, like I said, as we address those issues, it's easier to address things. Sometimes when these things arise, it's easy to get angry, it's easy to get mad, and it's so much easier to deal with these situations under calm guidelines and calming down and talking and coming to an agreement and talking to both sides and working on how we can figure out and making sure that that everybody takes their role in it. Is every bully or every parent of something that happens, are they going to be in agreement of what we decide or what we do, or supportive when we call home and say, this happened, can you help us take care of it? Absolutely not. But when they are, that's a lot easier to deal with. So I think it's hard for the child who's being bullied to ignore the one who is bullying them. Why would you tell a child to stay out of the way of a bully and not face the child who is being bullied? Why should the one who is being bullied have to agree with the bully? If peer groups are so important, why do you have the students sit by homeroom at lunchtime? Kids with few friends may not have any friends in that group and feel like an outsider on a daily basis. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to be forced to eat lunch with people that don't like me every day. Lunch activity time is one of the hardest times that we face during the day. Our teachers will tell you that, our associates will tell you that. As a supervisor of activity period for 14 years, I can personally attest that you put 200 people in one spot at one time. There's about 50 or 60 of us in here right now. You quadruple that, put tables in and spread them out, and you're eating lunch and doing things. It can be an organized riot, like Dave said earlier. Sometimes I think it is a riot. As we go through there, so what do? We've really tried to control that. We've switched from 2 or 3 different things. We do some different things at grade levels, and we try and work with that. We rotate the groups around. It used to just kind of be a free-for-all every day, and it really was a disaster. We wanted it to not be organized, to have the kids be able to have the freedom to do whatever they want, whenever they want. But sometimes that freedom with 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders doesn't work. And so how do we organize that? We try and build those relationships within the homerooms so they do have a relationship with that teacher, with that group of people. So when the teacher comes out at ease with them, or they go to their room and have lunch with them, that they do know somebody within that group. And as we've structured, we've just moved, we've been moving groups around, so they may still be in a group. A homeroom table might have 3 tables, and they can sit anywhere at any of those 3 tables. So it's not like, this is your seat, this is where you're sitting every day. There is a little bit of freedom of rotation within that, within the tables that they sit at. And then periodically we'll rotate the tables around. So this home group might have been here for a quarter, and now they're back over here, and we move those groups around. So as we look at those issues and deal with those, and then we mix it up. We have free day Fridays where if things go all right during the week, then on Fridays they have free seating and they sit wherever they want. So we do have a couple things in place like that.
And just one quick story, you've been very patient. I think it was last year, we had our homeroom seating for, I think we went 2 weeks, and then the students had open seating. And there was a young lady in the office just crying. And I went and I sat next to her and said, how can I help you? What's going on? She was a new student for 2 weeks. She had a place to sit. She had people to talk to. And the first day of free seating, the kids that she was friends with didn't even realize it, but they got into their circle of friends and there wasn't a spot for her. Actually, she was sitting at the table with them, but because of the way they were gathering, she didn't feel like she should stay there. And I said, who are some of the girls you usually eat with? And she told me some names, and I thought, oh, those girls would be mortified if they knew that she was in here crying. So I came out to the lunchroom and I kind of explained the situation. They all stood up with their lunch trays, they went into the conference room, they sat down with her, and they said, we are so sorry. We didn't realize what had happened. So, yes, it's a hard thing to maybe break up their peer groups, and yet getting those new kids especially that really wouldn't have had any place to sit. Can you imagine being the new kid coming into this lunchroom? And so that's just a positive that I kind of this worked at least for this one person. And then the kids realize that, hey, we need to do a better job of making sure we aren't excluding others.
And within that, we look at within the homerooms and the advisors as the teachers. Sometimes, we try and recognize who those students are. So if we see those things taking place, we know who the leaders are in our groups that we can come in. And the teachers will come and sit with their kids at lunchtime. Or they'll pull one of their kids aside and say, hey, nobody's really been sitting by this student. I've noticed everybody kind of stays away. For the next week, if you could walk up and just ask the student if they'll sit at your table within your group and do that. So teachers do that within their groups, and we look for those things and try and notice those things. Is that always going to be perfect? Is that always going to happen? No. Like we said, we're kind of trying to do the best that we can within that situation of how that needs to be organized. This one's kind of a two-part question. Would you agree with national study which states 1 in 6, 16% of students in middle school are bullied? I've looked at a lot of studies, I've seen a lot of numbers. As you look at those things, a lot of that, we were at a conference one time and they said, here's the definition of bullying. And the terms that they laid out, 100% of people could have said, I was bullied in middle school. So I think part of that, as we look at those studies and things we're doing, it's going to be different in every building. Are students being bullied? Absolutely. Are we dealing with it? Are we trying to work with kids? Are we trying to teach them to not do those things? Absolutely. If somebody sees something, we try and initiate it right away. When we look at the definition, like the counselors talked about earlier, that's really what we strive to look at with what's going on. Is it repetitive? Is it going on? Is it continual? Was it meant to cause harm? If we just stop and say, this behavior, any behavior, if this happens, that's considered a bully, that might be the case. But when we look into it, like we said, sometimes a student does something and there wasn't intent. They thought they were being funny. They thought they were doing something. Do we need to address that and teach them and educate them so they don't do that again? Absolutely. Was there an intent to harm? Not all the time. So to pick a number, I would say 1 in 6. It depends on what they look at, what the definition is going to be. I think if you went through and asked, and we took a survey of all the students in the middle school, would 1 in 6 kids say they're bullied in middle school? I don't think so. Has the district looked into the, excuse me if I say this wrong, Old Weiss Bully Prevention Program from Clemson University, which is recommended by the Iowa Department of Education?
It's very expensive.
Did I say that wrong?
Yeah. Oh, no, you said it right. I just said it's very expensive.
I think as a district we haven't really looked into that material very deeply. I've heard about it. I know other school districts have implemented it and have used it and been successful with it. But that's about all I know. Because in another district many years ago, we were looking into implementing that into our district too at the time. I think it's OLIS or OIS. Yeah. Yes. So.
And with that, I think it's important to note that there are a ton of programs. There's a ton of programs how to manage kids. There's programs how to create a perfect character counts program, or another program of how to create, everything. And I think what's important is that in everything we're doing, we're being consistent, we're being fair, and we're being as expedient as we can. And that just reinforces what was mentioned earlier in the slide, that if you bring it to our attention, we will address it. If you wait 3 months down the road, when it's to the point where the stress is so high at home and your child's been coming home day after day after day, and you think it's being addressed, don't assume that. Please tell someone, because as soon as the office knows, then we can handle that. But remember, our district, we're a character counts school district, we're a character counts community. I mean, we went through a long initiative, a long process to do that. You notice that when you're on Story Street, you see all those banners and all the businesses that are supporting that. So we don't necessarily use that counseling program, but we've chosen to use character counts. And then, of course, the next step is we use the PBIS program as well. Not every school in the nation uses PBIS, Positive Behavioral Intervention Supports, but we choose K-8 to do that program. So that's a program that we have found to be effective, and we have a PBIS team that meets monthly And it is a group of 14 educators that get together every month and go through what's been happening, go over the data, where are things occurring, how can we improve. For instance, pretty soon the kids will be noticing some posters in the next couple weeks. Every advisory group is having their group do an example of a character trait, and they're going to have pictures of actually them doing it. So they're going to see themselves on the walls in the poster. We're personalizing that information because it's about the students. The school is for them. And so we want them to see themselves and be able to learn from those and educate each other.
Having these bullying issues in the school is an issue, so I guess just kind of with that statement, as I would say, like reiterate what Mrs. Clark just said, we take it seriously, and that's kind of our point tonight, is we're not saying that these things don't happen, we're not saying that there's not bullying in the school, we're saying let us know so we can take care of it. We're not trying to pass the buck, we're not trying to say we don't want to do anything about it, we want to address the issues. We've put those resources forward so we can address those issues. And kind of leading into that, could this problem increase for the 5th graders because they were pushed up to the middle school? What grade has the biggest problem? As we look at those things, I have seen relatively few problems with the 5th grade. So I think that transition from 5th grade, the way the building is designed, the way the students are separated, I really can't even think offhand of a situation where I've had somebody come in and a 5th grader say, I have an older 8th grader picking on me. Maybe some, most of something might happen, like within a bus line or something like that, where they come together throughout the day. But I can't really think of any issues where that's been a problem. And I can say within the issues of where we're at as far as discipline referrals and stuff, I can say our numbers are drastically reduced from where they were at last year. So are we having success with some of the programs that we're doing and being able to address things more in a timely manner and address those? That's what our goal is. And if we can address those things faster, lots of times that takes care of it. If we can address something, kind of, it's like saying when you're potty training your dog and it goes to the bathroom on the floor and you come home 2 days later because you were gone and then you hit the button, put it out the door, and did something 2 days ago. If we can deal with something that happens, we get a referral. One of the things that we've done to expedite that process this year as we came in is make that system electronic. So instead of, we still kind of have multiple ways. We have a yellow referral ticket system where the teachers can fill something out and then they'll put it in our mailbox, and if it's something that we need to deal with, if it's not a huge issue, we can look at those later. But we made those electronic this year, so if something happens in a classroom, in between classes, the teacher types it up, hits send, comes to my computer, I can deal with it right then. It might not be sitting in their room until lunchtime or the end of the day when they get it and then bring it to the office, and then I might not get it till the next day. That response is almost instantaneous. So unless, sometimes I may have a number of things that I'm doing and they might be 2 or 3 down the list and I can still get to them within a couple periods, rather than a day later and a couple days later. So we've tried to expedite that process and do some things within that to help alleviate some of those things. And we've just been looking at the referral data lately, and we have had, I can say, a wonderful year this year, up to this point.
One other comment about 5th grade, I will say the beauty of having 5th graders here is we have a mentor program with our 8th graders and 5th graders. And we have several students in 5th grade that have an 8th grade mentor when they're with a teacher around, giving them guidance, talking about how to help them, maybe become accepted in a peer group. And that's really, really cool to see when you have, a student in the same building that can meet at the same time. Maybe we can rearrange the lunch a little bit to make it work. Those 5th graders really look up to those 8th graders. So we utilize those age ranges as well, so that's a nice beauty. Before we conclude, I want to make sure everyone is aware that the PowerPoint, the handouts, and the agenda are all online. They're on the district website. If you go to the middle school and you click on information, you'll see all that information there. We are also videotaping this, and because we had an 8th grade out-of-district basketball game tonight, we had some parents ask, can we videotape it? We're going to go ahead and burn that on a CD and have it available, and we're going to try and get that on our website as well. So if you know of anyone who wasn't able to attend, you can can encourage them to watch that. But at least you can have that information that's already online. All this stuff is online. So if you have any questions, or you go home and start talking and thinking more, please don't hesitate to call. Another thing, we went ahead and all of you who have children in the building, you would probably receive report cards today, if not today, tomorrow, and you received a magnet. We have those made for you, and you will have the different phone numbers that are easily accessible to you. If you'd like another magnet, there's some more over there, but we wanted to help encourage all of you to call, and it has those direct numbers. We even added a food service number because we get that call a lot, and so we gave that direct extension for you.
Did we have any other questions? I know I saw a hand up, and I didn't want to leave and say I didn't talk to you.
Well, I was actually thinking about the definition of bullying, and the message that is being sent to kids is it's not bullying unless it's repeated acts, aggressive acts against the target. How do you address habitual bulliers that only pick on one person a day and pick on another person a day that is aggressive and hurtful, but each one of them don't realize the other incident happened, and yet they're getting mixed messages saying report, but yet it hasn't been repeated.
Yeah, and so what we always want them to, if it's something that they feel hurtful by or something that somebody's doing that they want to stop, we encourage them to report that, to tell a teacher. Kind of the beauty about the middle school concept and the teams is, as we look for those things and we communicate back and forth, the teachers meet in their teams within that grade level, every period is we get things together, and sometimes the student thinks, well, I can do this in this classroom, do this here, do this there, and then when the team gets together and says, this happened to this student, does anybody else? And somebody says, oh, I've noticed that in here too, or I've noticed that here too. And then lots of times, that's when I'll get a referral from the teachers and just say, in team today, we noticed this was a problem, it's a repetitive behavior. And so then we try and figure out ways to connect the dots to get back. Does it sometimes take a little while longer? Obviously, yeah, some of those situations would. And so we try and get to those, but there's lots of those situations where there's quite a few dots to connect before we get back to really the underlying issues of what happened.
I know that you tell them to report it, you talk to the bully. As soon as the bully finds out that, who reported all that, definitely going to know. It makes it worse for the target, because my daughter's saying as soon as she goes to the bathroom, the locker room, it intensifies. Because they strike harder where the cameras and the staff are not active.
And like I said, those are the issues where sometimes that's hard to come forward and say, and that's, we want to know about those things, and those are the things that have to be reported. And that's, like I said, that's one of the first things that we try and address is the retaliation of this is said. And every situation is handled a little bit differently, depending on what level it gets to. The first thing I say when I address a student, I don't come in and say, Carter Kelly just came into the office and reported that this is what you're doing. Now, sometimes if you say, sometimes it is obvious, because when you tell them that this happened, they know who they did it to. And so lots of times how I'll address that situation is because kids don't always know. I'll say, this situation happened. It was recognized by a teacher. It was recognized by many students. And so I know they're not, but we still have to kind of come to a way of, we always try and come a roundabout way of coming to them, and we work with those things with the direct retaliation, and we tell the students, if we go out of here and this happens again, is always telling them that this is what we're going to do. Is that going to be the end of it? I'd like to think if I told a kid to stop doing something, that was just going to be the end of it, and it's never going to happen again. Is that the reality? In some situations, yes, but most of the time, no. And so sometimes it's a series of how we deal with it, and we have to have that reported back to us if that continues to go on, because that is that continued form of bullying and harassment. So we need it reported to us. We need to know those things.
I shouldn't be talking, but I just wanted to say about your question that if something happens in the classroom and it's not repeated, but it's a mean act, that we don't wait until a student does something repeatedly to document that. And so there's a database where all that information goes. And so counselors and administrators can look up a student and see, oh, he maybe didn't or she didn't bully this person repeatedly, but this person and this person and this person, and that is documented. So we try to do that anyway. That's our goal.
Any other questions? Yes.
Is it volunteers or who is it that are wearing the shirt that says something about the bullying, but supposedly they're red shirts that say I care. Well, supposedly the kids can go to that person to report something. Is that, or is it just?
No. Well,
sorry.
We have several different T-shirts. Student shirts. Let's start with student shirts. We have our PBIS and mentors, and their shirts are lime, yellow, green. They're bright. They're like safety kind of colored shirts. And those students wear those throughout the year, but primarily in the beginning of the year. And so if students have questions, they know who to go to. We have our social norms campaign, which Officer Powers mentioned. Those T-shirts and sweatshirts are black with some green writing that talk about respect, starts with respect. Those are given out as freebies as part of that campaign. It's a 2-year, $25,000 grant that our Safe and Drug-Free Schools gave us. And so those are being worn. We have teachers and associates who got together and have black shirts that say, we care. That was just something that as teachers and associates we came together and thought that'd be a neat thing to wear. And so on Wednesdays we usually wear those shirts. Those are adults. We also have staff shirts. I'm not thinking of what...
Let me rephrase this.
Okay.
How many hall monitors do you have?
How many hall monitors? We have every adult in the building during the passing time is expected to be out in the hall, and you will see adults everywhere. We don't have student hall monitors. And the reason we don't have student hall monitors is specifically, as we've learned with adolescence and how children develop, it is not appropriate for children to start questioning other students' behavior because they don't understand the story that they come to school with, as Sue talked about. And so it's not the student's responsibility to discipline other students. It's the job of the associates and the adults to do that. And so the adults are visible, but we do have students who see something wrong going on and they'll come tell an adult. And that's why we have our advising advisor program, because we want students to have, and we have our club day, we want students to have a different adult that they can see throughout the building. Maybe they don't have a close relationship with any of the 8 teachers they have, but their club teacher they get along with, that's another adult in the building they can go to if they have an issue. Does that address?
Kind of. Well, because I was trying to figure out why, like, the whole thing with the lunch, why they can't have lunch together. To try, I mean, basically, children need to be babysat, and that's what I'm not hearing a whole lot of. I know the teachers and all this are out there, but the teachers are having to do other things and stuff, so I mean, we've got cameras, but who's watching, who's checking the cameras?
We do. We have administratively. If we have an issue that occurs, then we address that and we'll look back at the cameras. But I'll be honest, I've been here for 4 years. I think I can count 5 times in 4 years that I've actually looked at the camera to investigate an actual incident that is severe enough that we can, because we don't have very many severe, we don't have kids, we haven't had a fight this school year. We don't have very many aggressive behaviors like that, which is really what schools utilize the cameras for. If we have a theft or something we're trying to watch, but the cameras are hard to see as well, because it's really hard to key in to see, what does that student look like.
Well, the problem that I'm having is my child being bullied, and
This is a specific deal.
And one of the things that we hope to do tonight, if you had individual situations, that we'd be glad to visit with you afterwards. And so we certainly will stay around. We have gone about 20 minutes after our time frame, and we appreciate your patience and sitting here and staying and listening. I hope you gained a lot of information. The other thing I hope that you gained is some faces that you know you can connect with now if you have situations like that. It's important that we continue to hear when these situations come up so we can act quickly. That's the best way we can respond and make sure that we put an end to things as quickly as we can. So we'll be around for a few minutes for those that might have individual questions, and we'd be glad to visit with you at that time. Thank you very much.